Planning Committee is excited to be able to go public with the Money for Mission program. It's a program we've been working on for almost 12 months now with the wider synod and other presbyteries, and there's a lot of energy gone into it from this presbytery, which we think would be great news for not just for congregations finding ways of sustaining their mission, but also for the presbytery and the wider church. We're aware that there's a financial crisis at the moment. That's no secret. That's been brought on by COVID-19. That's not the focus of tonight. The focus of tonight is what the good news for this opt-in program will be for local congregations and the presbytery. And we're hoping to run an hour and a half workshop or two later on to unpack all the ideas and questions that we might be bringing tonight. So if you want to put your questions or comments in the chat, we can talk about those later. But we want to hear from tonight from Jenny Byrnes, from Matt Harry, from Sam Nicholas, and from Peter Thomas. So I'll hand it over to Jenny.
Members of the Port Phillip East Presbytery, and we start with an introductory video. Thanks, Matt.
In line with the Synod priorities of being adaptive and responsive to the changes within the Church and wider society, there is an opportunity that you may be interested to hear about. We have noticed a few things that seem to be present within the life of the Church. Many congregations and faith communities seem to be asset-rich but cash-poor. An abundance of resources that could be utilised for further mission is retained within buildings that may not be fit for purpose. Sometimes these properties require a lot of maintenance, and often this falls to a few dedicated people who feel as though it is beginning to become a burden. So the Synod is creating a new fund. This fund will allow responsible bodies the opportunity to sell property that is surplus to their missional requirements and to invest those proceeds into the Money for Mission fund that will be managed by U Ethical. The responsible body will receive units in the Money for Mission fund to the value of the property that has been sold. These units will support a half-yearly income to an investing congregation of at least as high as the net rental income. As well as the income that will be received, as with other U Ethical funds, there is an expectation that the units will appreciate in value over time, growing the capital base, which can be redeemed after a period of investment in the Money for Mission fund. All of this can be achieved without any ongoing concerns about maintaining the property, freeing people up for the mission of the local church. Best of all, there are no restrictions about how the income paid to the responsible body is utilised. Some of the proceeds that this fund generates will also be shared with the wider church's missional initiatives. Further details of this wonderful opportunity are available through your presbytery or through Equipping Leadership for Mission at Synod.
Thank you for, as I said, making time in your agenda this evening. And we'd just like to give you a high-level understanding of what the Money for Mission program is. And as Duncan said, Sam, Peter, Matt and myself will give this high-level view. You will have received two documents, I hope, in anticipation of this evening's brief presentation. One's a pamphlet, which gives a high-level view, and the other is a much longer booklet. Both of these will be available in electronic form ongoing, and we plan to print the pamphlet in large numbers to be available across all the congregations and the wider church. We hope you've had a chance to read especially the frequently asked questions, which respond to much of the specific detail in the program. As most of you are aware, it's time for a change in how we resource our mission locally and across the wider church. Where once property was built faithfully and cared for faithfully and was at the core of our local missional endeavours, the 21st century congregation and the wider church are needing to free itself from property assets that are surplus to our mission and are no longer fit for purpose. Some of you will have been at Synod last year when, through a working group session, The call was made from the presbyteries and from the congregations to establish a transparent and simple pathway to transition property that is no longer fit for purpose into a resource for local mission and for supporting the wider mission sustained through synod grants and the like. We believe the Money for Mission program is one response, a key response to this request from the congregations and presbyteries in order for us to embrace a positive future. This program now invites the whole church, every sphere, to assess whether we are being good stewards of the finite resources we have, and to challenge ourselves to ensure that mission is sustainable into the decades to come. Thanks, Sam.
Good evening, everyone. The Money for Mission program and fund, the intentional underlying principle, one of the core principles, is to provide a steady income stream while at the same time preserving our capital base. So in essence, what we're saying is that we want to maintain our capital base and not sell our assets in order to fund the day-to-day activities of our operations. The other aspect which was mentioned through the video was taking some of the administrative burden away from property management, and that has a number of facets to it. Obviously, the day-to-day upkeep of properties, external environmental, legislative requirements, building regulations, levies, etc. And a piece of feedback that we've been consistently receiving is that having an open and transparent understanding of how the actual fund works, how the money goes into the fund as a responsible body, how that income's distributed, how a unit's allocated, and how the wider church benefits from that also. How does the program work? Obviously, there's a lot of detail behind this, and as Duncan mentioned, we'll be having further sessions so we can ask more one-to-one questions and answers around how it actually works and comes together. But at a high level, the responsible body will recognise a property that is being underutilised or excess in requirements in terms of its portfolio, and in conjunction with the presbytery will go through a discernment process to determine whether or not it wishes to participate in the actual Money for Mission fund. It is an opt-in process, so there's no one forcing anyone, but it's a collaborative approach and discussion to determine whether or not this is the appropriate way or an opportune way to go forward. It provides an income stream that is flexible, unencumbered, so you can use that income as you see fit, as opposed to the traditional ways of going forward through, for example, the IMOF process, where there are certain requirements that need to be fulfilled. And then hopefully over a long period of time, investing under a professional body being through UEthical, is that there will be capital appreciation as the units grow over time, a long-term horizon. And that's what we're asking for when you commit to the program, is it's over a 7-year period minimum. And that way there's an ability to grow the fund and then build the income base accordingly. And part of that income base, obviously, is that it's a shared approach, and that shared approach is through, obviously, the responsible body, but also the wider church, and through the frequently asked questions and the pamphlet that you would have received, there's some priorities around where those funds go in terms of wider missional purposes.
We always get asked the question, how are we going to make more money than we are at the moment? And it's a good question. The simple reality is that of the two main property types, one being residential rental property, they're relatively low returns. And in the case of much of our non-residential property, it's either earning us nothing or in fact it's costing us some money. So if we're able to identify residential properties, ex-manses, that we don't believe justify being kept within the congregational area, it's possible to sell those and invest the proceeds on a longer term basis and obtain a significantly larger return than a typical net rental return would provide. So to give comfort around that aspect, we are proposing that the fund will underwrite the net rental return that you are currently receiving from a residential property, an ex-manse that is being rented to market. But in addition to that, we will be able to provide a top-up or a premium return of additional 0.5% or 0.75% in regional areas. So that would leave, on a net return basis, a return of about 2.25% or 2.5% as capped figures in the metro or regional areas. Importantly, this is revolving around the actual rental return you get at the moment. So it's after all of the costs of rental and having a property that what you actually get to keep in your hands. For non-residential property, if you sell something at the moment, you have the choice of either investing those sales proceeds in a project of a capital nature and with a missional outcome and aim, or you can invest them in an interest-only mission fund, which gives you a certain rate of return. So to make it attractive to investors who sell property, we're saying we'll give the same level of return and a little bit more than you would get with an interest-only mission fund. It's driven by a formula which is available and transparent. You'll be able to see for yourselves how it actually works, and it's modelled very closely on the old BOMA scales, so it's something that's familiar with you. The key aspect for both areas of investment here and return is that they give you complete flexibility over what you use the income for. Whereas traditionally on an IOMF, you have to use the income for certain areas only, and they need to be missionally anchored. You have a lot more flexibility around income from either of these areas, and we think that's a significant benefit.
So where does the money go? Both Sam and Peter have touched on this, so I don't need to go over it in detail. But basically, this refers to the income that will be generated by the units, and that income will be shared, as Peter and Sam have both said. It's shared between a distribution to the responsible body who sold the asset and put the whole amount into the fund. So there's not wider church distribution at the selling stage. The units that are provided through the fund are to the amount of the net sale proceeds. So the sharing from the income from the units is to the responsible body or the congregation, and then of course the distribution to the wider church for mission resourcing will be shared with Presbytery staffing and their needs, assembly, congress, and then wider church missional grants. So there may be some properties that responsible bodies have, such as tennis courts that aren't being used anymore, or excess land, or there could be, as has been already mentioned, residential properties that are now simply rented to the market and were previously utilised as manses. Here's an example here, St Thomas. You can see that there's a residential property right next to the church. There was a series of amalgamations because there was a couple of churches that were next to each other. That residential property there was not the preferred place for ministers to live, and they had inherited a couple of different residential properties. So it was just rented to the market. So that would be a prime example that it's not going to be used as a manse into the future. Therefore, it's simply being used at the moment to resource mission, but it can be done in a hassle-free way now because of the option of opting in to the Money for Mission Fund.
So in summary, it's opt-in. We'd like you to hear that. It's opt-in, and it's a great time and opportunity to reconsider the effective stewardship of the resources you have for mission. My hope is that all of us in this conversation will opt in to be the UCA generation that sets the church forward for mission into the decades to come. So, how do you participate? The pamphlet and booklet with details are available. We're inviting you to have this conversation with your church council and with your presbytery. There are some synod contacts, much more than just myself and Peter, but make contact to get more details as you would like. And the next steps really are for you to familiarise yourself with the frequently asked questions and to offer and ask any questions that you want, particularly in the information sessions. To imagine how your congregation may make use of a different resource income stream beyond a property rental, and how that might free both your time and your resources to engage in local mission as well as supporting the wider church. And as Duncan said, encourage attendance at the information session that's going to be arranged within this presbytery in a few weeks ahead. So thank you, everyone. That's we're not taking questions tonight, I understand. I'm just checking. I can see Duncan on my screen, not many other people. My understanding is that we are going to thank you for the time and leave you with the documents and hopeful for some imaginative conversations amongst your colleagues. Thank you.